Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for joining InnoVigilance for our sixth webinar. Thank you for your interest in our webinars, our events in drug safety and pharmacovigilance. Today, we're gonna speaking about what are the current challenges and realities of artificial intelligence in pharmacovigilance and drug safety. And we will learn from frontline, from an expert, artificial intelligence expert in life sciences. So stay with us. Thank you for joining us. I would like to thank also our special guest today. Let me just begin by introducing myself for those that don't know me yet. I'm Omar Reimer. I'm PharmD and PhD and safety officer, pharmacovigilance specialist for drug and device safety, working for big pharmaceutical company based in Greater Montreal, Quebec in Canada. So my journey, I was graduated as a bachelor in pharmacy from the University of Oran in Algeria, North Africa. Then had earned a PhD in pharmacology from the University of Algiers before moving to Paris and get a Master Science in Industrial Pharmacy, then in a Master Science of Pharmacovigilance and Drug Safety from Paris Descartes University. In my career, I was a lecturer on pharmacology. I was also a director for a pharmaceutical product laboratory for quality control, then a pharmacovigilance pharmacist in Paris for 3 years, then also a pharmacovigilance and drug and device safety pharmacist for 8 other years in Paris, France. Then I moved in Canada when I'm working, and I'm still working as a pharmacovigilance and drugs device safety specialist in Laval or Greater Montreal. I'm also usually a speaker and chair of roundtables at the World Drug Safety Congress in the US and Europe, articles author regarding the artificial intelligence impact on pharmacovigilance. I'm also a member of the International Society of Pharmacovigilance and a member of the executive committee for the North American chapter. I got my certification in improving global health and safety, focusing on safety and quality from Harvard University in 2020. So our guest today is François Audibert, artificial intelligence specialist. Let me say that he's an expert in this space. He's currently a vice president for US operations at Vitrana. Short bio of François. So François has over 30 years of experience, mostly as the program manager of design authority in various industries. More recently, François has started as an artificial intelligence specialist, and he is currently vice president for US operations at Vitrana, where he leads customer experience for the USA. For the last 12 years, François has led functional architecture design and many tier 1 implementations in the clinical research and development space. Lots of those designs were centered around system and transactional integrations, creating seamless process integrations across various functions or technologies for large life sciences organizations, including solutions leveraging adverse data science expertise like machine learning, deep learning, and NLP. Currently, Francois is the one of the innovators for event-driven database intelligent assistant decision program. So thank you, Francois, for accepting our invitation. You are a friend, and thank you. Yeah. You will, and you still always an inspiration for me.
Thank you, Dr. Omar. Yeah, and sorry, the picture is a little bit old. I would just like to add that I started as a Master of Science in Computer Science, starting with AI a long time ago when it was mostly based around rules engines. And I did a few modelization that have nothing to do with safety. I modelized a greenhouse to grow tomato using sensors and information from sensors to make decisions about what to do next. I also developed models to replant forests after wildfires, as well as growing vineyards. In fact, wine production in anywhere in the world. So, if you're in South Africa and want to have a producing wine of Burgundy or Burgundy-like, the program I developed back then was capable of telling you what you need to do with the soil, what vinification process you need to start, etc. Then I move in consulting, mostly for large enterprises. This is where I developed my project management skills. And in the 90s, I touch again a little bit because it was the start of the neural network. So I touch a little bit. I had a two nodes neural network for the allocation of large network for TV broadcast, where the challenges
Okay.
were to try to balance out the constraints. And then lately, I've been involved in drug safety, and I've used a new advanced technology of so-called artificial intelligence to make progress towards what life sciences organizations wants to achieve in their PV processes. In the last few years, I've been covering a lot of the R&D spectrum, working with clinical trial, putting in place CTMS, clinical trial management systems, clinical supplies, but also in patient engagement, patient recruitment, investigators and site payments, as well as, of course, safety systems. So the first thing I would like to get rid of is the term artificial intelligence, because even though we use it to introduce the domain, it is not intelligent at all. And as far as I'm concerned, it's not really artificial. I will explain very briefly why. And again, this is as of today, right? If you look back this video in a few years, you will see that I will be mostly wrong in stating that computers cannot be intelligent, in the sense that it has a limit into what novelty those computers can accept or address. Given a problem, the notion of intelligence is finding a new way to provide a solution, or facing a new information, a new situation, is to apply existing or combining existing processes or creating a whole new process to come to the solution. And typically the way we use computers today is very narrow. It is very well suited for a certain number of issues. But as soon as what you give to the computer as information, the results are going to start creeping out of what is your target. So that's the current state of the affairs, and there is significant efforts from the academia and companies to try to breach that ceiling and get to a point where we could be more trustful in what the computers are capable of achieving.
Yeah. Wow. So yes, of course, that it's a hot topic. as
Absolutely.
we see in different events, even in drug safety and pharmacovigilance and in life science space and pharmaceutical industry, that there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of discussions regarding the use of artificial intelligence and automation. If we say that the automation and the impact of automation on our day-to-day work.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in fact, what we deal with are three elements. One is the business problem. What do we want to solve? And of course, this means we have a business context that is PV, right? The second is because we are mostly using statistical method, and we have to decide which statistical methods we are going to use and combine to solve the business problem. The third element is the data we need, and the work we have to do on the data to make so that those data can be used. As everybody knows, computers understand only numbers. So if you have data that is not number, you need to move into a stage where you have numbers that do not create any sort of determination already, right? But let's talk about the business problem, right? Let's talk about
Yeah.
PV as a practice. The first thing is PV is reactive. No matter how hard we try, what we collect as information that is going to get processed through PV is something that has already happened. It's at the moment a drug is being given to a healthy volunteer, to a patient into a clinical trial, or to a patient out there in the market. And we are doing our best because we have had issues, and we still have issues with products, drugs mostly, or sometimes medical devices that are not doing what they're not doing only what they are supposed to. And so we have a PV that is part of a social contract. The society is telling, well, we need to reduce harm to innocent people, right? It's an obligation. And a contract means there are consequences. If you don't do that, there is a consequence. And PV is set in an environment where the consequence, the ultimate goal of PV, in fact, if we cannot reduce the harm to innocent people, is to put somebody in jail. That's what PV is all about. Who is guilty? Who did it wrong? Why it happened? And who did it wrong? So first of all, that creates a limit for what the computers can be used for in PV, because computers are not going to jail, right? Yeah, you can have a fine for this company that has done this or that. You can potentially drag the coders and the people involved in hacking, as an example, in front of the court, and they will go to jail. But the PV specialist have to use computer in a way that is accepted by the authorities. And that creates a second constraint on using computers, is that you have to decide what part of that usage will still be given to users and what part of that usage will be given to agents or automated systems. So the goal of reducing costs has to be achieved within those two boundaries. You cannot give everything to the computer, and you still have to try to find a way to reduce costs.
Yeah.
One typical challenge is what exactly make the cost for a PV organization. And again, we have three major parts. Usually we think about the two first one and we forget a little bit the third one. The first part is you have users. So you need to train them. You need to describe in working instructions what they are supposed to do. You need to give them programs and maintain them. You need to give them data and access to the data. Sometimes you need to give them offices, and you need to maintain that level of expertise, both in terms of training and in terms of up-to-date systems. And it costs a lot of money. Usually we have a bias to say users are costing a lot of money because of wages. But even when we try to leverage outsourcing and reducing the wages, the goal is to try to find a unitary user involvement in what PV does that make it so we can face an increase in volumes because we are objectively part of a situation where we have to give more drugs to people, to more people. The population on Earth is growing, and the number of things we have to fight in terms of diseases is growing.
Yeah.
So you want that unitary cost of the involvement of user to make it so that in front of this increased challenge over the years, you maintain something that is manageable. So it goes beyond the wages. And the second part of that is because you have to maintain a proper documentation of how you came to a conclusion, which pieces of your PV system was involved, users, processes, computers. You need to document a lot. Typically, you start with what the system is supposed to do. Then you most likely describe how it's going to do it. And then you describe how you verify that it was doing it the way you intended and the results were what you were expecting. And this creates an obligation in terms of change management that PV has within life science. Of course, other industries do not have that kind of constraints, but we do. And we have to leverage that. And that's the second part of the cost. It has a dimension which has to be meaningful for users. So whatever you put in this bucket of cost, the goal is to make sense for a human. And the third one, which a lot of people do not really integrate, we talk about it typically around the definition of TCO, total cost of ownership. We talk mostly about owning systems, computers, data centers, using resources from vendors, cloud providers, etc., licenses for software. But there is another cost dimension that is going to pop up more and more in companies. It's the greenhouse or the sustainability summary. A lot of companies are trying to achieve a zero carbon emission footprint, and they are claiming we take all sorts of measures to make sure we do that. They think about buildings, they think about energy overall. They try to leverage a lot of electricity, but then we tend to forget that to use a computer, you need a computer. And a computer is not made out of thin hair, right? It has a lot of material that is requiring significant process to manufacture, to transport, to install, to maintain. So when you try to move out of the user-based cost and into the computer-based cost, more you use the computer, more you are separating yourself from all those hidden costs, even though you have to make an obligation towards your shareholders and to the society at large that you know what you're doing with those computers. And that's the second part of the limits we are talking about. It's putting somebody in jail, having limits in terms of cost, and then the other limit is if you switch everything to computers, how do you make sure you're not polluting and destroying the planet? It's not a big deal right now for PV, but it's going to become a big deal in the next few years. So if you think about leveraging statistical methods, which are computer intensive, and you want to leverage a lot of data, how can you do that in the best possible way? Because data science, which is the reality of artificial intelligence today, it's a human activity.
Yeah.
You have to decide what the business problem you want to achieve. You want to decide or use the data you have. You have to process this data in a way, before processing it, you have to organize the data in a way that makes sense for what you want to achieve. And then you have to decide what type of statistical methods you're going to use to make sense of the data you have. And that's where we have the last one, the last box we are sitting in for AI in PV is what is the data we have? And if you think about it, there is a lot of data we don't control. We get a report and it is what it is. A lot of our job is to try to make sense of that report, but it's also to report it the way we have received it. We cannot create a new data on top of that. We just can make the data a little bit more clean, a little bit more aligned, things a little bit more explicit. And then we have to express an opinion. As a company, we have to say, is my drug responsible of what I have been informed of by this report? But a lot of things are moving without us capable of adding value. So it creates a limit to, in PV, specifically in PV, what you
Yeah.
can do with the data you have. So let me take an example. Let's say that you need to make a decision about classification. Is it a yes or is it a no? And you start looking at the data you have, and you realize that, in fact, in your PV database, you have had multiple generations of different data consistency, different data elements. Because you start with an old system, then you move that system into a better
Yeah.
one, but you didn't have the possibility to really make the data completely aligned with all the capabilities of the new system. Then once you had the new system in place, you went through different stabilization phases where you eventually decide on different ways to use the system or enter the data. And so when the computer is looking at all this data, in fact, the computer doesn't understand there is different level of things that are throwing the computer in the wrong direction. So you want to have a yes and no, and you have data that are blank, and you don't know what blank means. Is it, I don't know, was it not reported? Was
Yeah.
it even asked? What is even asked but not answered? You see where I'm going. We are trying as an industry to put in place R3 as an example, to try to gather those fine granular detail, but it's only after a certain point. We are not capable of addressing the missing value, the missing data, by adding what we know now, because it's a little bit difficult to recreate the context of history.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that box has to be understood. The regulatory box, the cost box, the limit of the data, and then what we are trying to achieve.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you. Yeah, Francois, you make a good transition for my first question. Yeah, just which is it realistic to deploy in production an automation where no human intervention is required between the receipt of a potential notification of an adverse event and the submission of a full-fledged report to the authorities?
Not yet, and maybe not for a long time, right? So the first challenge is, as we are working in a regulated industry, it's always a question of what the regulators will accept,
Yeah.
right? And over the years, if you take a little bit a step back, you realize that there is a sort of back and forth. We tend to say, okay, what the regulators are using themselves.
Yes.
What are the processes they have put in place? So if we do that, they cannot blame us for doing something wrong because we are doing what they are doing.
100%.
It's a good method, but it lacks one key element. The regulators are not doing what we are doing. The regulators have a public health concern, and they want to identify if we have been lacking a due diligence.
Yes.
Whereas we, as the life science organization or the PD organization,
Right.
our role is to make sure we know what we knew when we knew it, which is kind of different. So again, we have the police, the regulators, and we
Yes.
have us. And the goal of our work is to say, with what I was given, with what I knew at the time, I apply medical science, I apply business processes, I apply computer systems in the way I describe my intent to be.
Yes. All
Which is
about
kind of different.
compliance. Yeah.
Yes, it's all about compliance. Compliance to a state at a given point in time. So let me give you an example of something that happened recently, so we can understand.
Yes.
Two aspects, right? The data and the outcome. So let's start with the outcome. We are in a pandemic, and we know that three things are working. The first one is masks. Masks are working. They are safe. We know how to produce them. We know how to distribute them. We know how to use them. it's very safe. The second is hand washing. We have done it for centuries now. We know how to do it. We have to do it more. We have the techniques. You have YouTube videos and so on. And then we have the so-called social distancing, right?
Yes.
And when we apply that, we know we reduce viral infections, especially airborne viral infections. And we have seen that because the flu has decreased the last year, as an example, right? But
Definitely.
now that people start feeling in a better situation, all of a sudden they let go the social distancing, they let go the hand washing, and they let go the mask.
Asks.
And we see viral infection taking over again. Why, as a society, are we not able to make a decision to say, okay, I move into a new phase of our human history. Now I have to apply those practices and I will maintain them. It shows the powerless of PV. We can have the data, we can have the documentation, we can have the practice, we can have the communication. People will still choose to do things that are not in their best interests.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one thing to have the objective to improve patient safety. It's one thing to try to improve patient communication and the science behind PV. It's another thing to get it applied. And then at the source, in terms of data, we have another example of an issue, right? The opioid crisis.
Yes.
If you were part of the PV department of a producer of painkillers, you will have seen something coming, not based on the safety and the efficacy, because the level of addiction of those painkillers was known. It was in the clinical research. It was well established, right? But you will have seen, because on your periodic report, you are supposed to show the market exposure. And if a small town of a few thousand people receive billions of doses, it means on your periodic report, you need to show my company has distributed 10 billion doses. And that's a red flag.
Yes.
How come that no one has reacted? How come that we had those billions there? Because PV didn't know that, because the information never came to PV that was the market exposure. So if you don't have the data in PV, then you cannot really make the right conclusion, even though you have the process, even though you have the system, even though you have the training, even though you have the regulation. And so when we think about moving from users to agent by using data, because that's all we have right now, then the concern is, do we have the data we need for the job we want to achieve? Because as users in PV, and a lot of you here are in that field, we have more than the data we see on the screen. We have the medical education, we have the medical training. And this is something that is difficult to put inside the computer. The medical information is something you could potentially achieve. You could connect to those big document databases available out there and get all sorts of research paper and use NLP, natural language processing, to try to make sense of what is related to what is an action and a consequence, and so on and so forth. But you will lack the medical training. A lot of people practicing PV, as you, Dr. Omar, you have been facing patients. You have been in hospitals. You have been in ER. You have been dealing with the unknowns. You have had to develop a capability to face something new in a very usual setting. This patient very much looks like this patient, but in fact, this is a completely different situation. And so, again, if we go back to this notion of intelligence and data science, computers have a challenge to identify what is new, whereas users have a capability to fill in the blanks because they have all that medical training, all that medical education, all that medical background. So when we try to solve a business issue and say, can we get rid of human? Can we achieve a goal where the company assessment on a not well-formed report, because some data are missing, and sending this to the authority can be done by a computer? The answer is not yet, because the computer lacks the medical training. It lacks the capability to fill in the blanks. On the big picture, when you have lots of data, when you have lots of those reports missing exactly the same type of information, When you have lots of repeat of the same product on the same AE with the same limited lab data, yes, the computer can use the statistical method to try to figure out it's most likely going to be this opinion or most likely to be that opinion. And the goal of data science in the field of PV is always to produce a this or that. This is an AE, this is not an AE. This is serious, this is not serious. This is causal, this is related, this is unrelated. Those are the things we would like the computer to achieve to replace users by the computer. But
Yeah.
as we have seen, we cannot achieve a process made by a computer that will be 100% perfect. We have metrics, we have elements in data science to measure the opinions or the classification done by a computer, to measure what the computer says is this, and it is, and what the computer says is that, and it is, and also the opposite. The computer say it's this, but it is not. So the computer say it's an AE, but it is not an AE. The computer say it's not an AE, but it is an AE. So typically in production, what you do if you have a system that says AE, not AE, if you say not AE, you send it to a group of people that are going to review the data and confirm that the computer was right. And then if you say this is an AE and it is not an AE, you hope that your process that you put in place at one point before sending it to the authority will catch it up and say, no, not good. So when we talk about the cost, what we want to do, what we have to do, is to make sure that what we put in non-AE, despite having some of them that are AE, is a pile that is going to be manageable by a team that is of reasonable size. So what you try to do is you try to make sure that you give to the team a pile of things where most of them are A's and few of them are confirmed non-A's.
Yeah.
So that the team will, because it will be made out of users, right? The team will be efficient. They will find value in the work they are doing because they will be adding to the system. They will be selecting A's and sending them into the system. If you have a large pile of non-AE and few of them are A's, then it's going to be very difficult. You will need lots of users. You will need them to be very highly motivated because they will not find AEs every day. And at the same time, if you have a lot of AEs that are in this pile, you will have users that say, wait a minute, why don't you change the system? Why don't you make it better so that I really have only non-AEs in this pile and I really have only AEs in that pile, right? And we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah. Well, what is amazing, and all when I met you and when I meet you, I always learn from you. Your experience in artificial intelligence, but sometimes I forget that, and I believe that you're a pharmacovigilance and drug safety expert.
I'm not.
And as you have a strong knowledge of the PV regulation, the PV space, the day-to-day activities of the users, of course, your customers, and you also the up-to-date. So yeah, I learned a lot from you, and I'm really feeling happy and lucky to have you as my guest today. We jump to the other question, which is what are by priority the most challenging hurdles to achieve the automation in PV and drug safety?
Yeah. So I talk in generic terms about the academic, the technology and also reasoning challenges. The most challenging thing for me is the discrepancy between what you hear on the news or sometimes in the PV organization claiming they do this and they do that and it's all wonderful, and the ground reality. So putting in place, and we have done that for many years now, an automation solution, not a simple RPA, not something that looks at how the screen is being filled every day and does it automatically, because that put you at a certain place. Not you don't go far with that sort of short-term automation. You make some gains, you improve the cost that we are talking about, you relieve the users of some critical tasks, but very quickly you realize the computer has to be smarter in what type of inputs or actions on that
Yes.
screen it will take, right? So what automation we are talking about is really something where you take off tasks being done by users. And again, you have to manage this false positive where you think it is not something and it is something. So you really have to understand what are the success criteria and be very humble so that you set up a journey. The most challenging hurdle is achieving automation takes time. Not that it takes time purely from a technology perspective. We can have solutions that will turn around very quickly, but it takes time to get the right blend of what the users will still do, the computer will do, and the trust they will have between each other. The trust
Both, yeah.
is the critical part because you can accept mistakes made by other users. You have done the job, you know that they are working on ICSR and then they get a phone call and now they are dragged into a meeting and there is somebody showing up asking for a report. And so they are always multitasking. So you know the level of stress that sometimes can occur
Yes.
and you are forgiving. And also you have processes in place to catch up, whether it's in line with the case processing or after the fact, or when you do the periodic reports, when you do the analysis, when you do the safety committee reviews, when you do the team safety team meetings every week, etc. You have ways, you put in place kappa, you extend training, you put in place validation in the system, etc., etc. When it comes to a computer, it's a little bit more difficult because you're way less forgiving, right? We
Yes.
all have heard about, oh, it's the computer fault, right? You show up at the desk and you ask for something and it's not working and you're like, why don't I have my receipt, my product, this or that? And you say, it's the computer, right? So the way we human behaves in front of a computer, we want the computer to be always right. And in an automation process, that's not the case. So the challenge for a PV organization is to set the expectations in the right way. It will be long. It will be baby steps. You have to make progress every month, every week, or every 3 months, quarters, etc. You have to show progress. And you have to organize it within the boundary of the change management I was talking about, collecting the evidences on how you made the system better. And that's where today we have the biggest challenge. Going live with an automation within the PV processes is definitely possible. It can be achieved, definitely.
Yes.
But as you progress towards using the system every day, you have this corrections coming in of this was not right. The right classification should have been like this. The right outcome from the computer should have been like that. And the way you feed back this information into the computer has to be done in a sustainable manner. You have to use techniques, and some of them are being developed as we speak, to make sure that you don't end up with a system that is only driven by exceptions. When I started in the field and we were using rules engine, it was a given that when we'll discover the models to be wrong, we'll simply add more rules. The impact of that was to make a simple classification. The computer will have to wait longer because it will have to examine lots of rules. Because now we are using data and now we are using statistical method. When you are giving a feedback, it's always difficult because you have one example of something that went wrong and the computer cannot make sense of one example. The computer has to get many to try to create that sort of pattern, understanding the element in that data context that made the wrong call. So you have to have humans that are going to get that feedback from the users. And you have to document procedures on how you take that single example, create enough similarities, train the system, measure the outcome of the system, not only to solve that exception, but also to not degrade the behavior of the system against the other ones. So it takes a long time. If a mistake is made by a user and you are set in the process to correct it, even if it's post fact, even if it's as a sampling method
Yeah.
or every now and then, you will catch it up and you will correct it right away. So you will be able to send an amendment or to send an update to the authorities, whatever it is that you need to do. But if it's a computer, you can identify the error very quickly. To get that error into production, we have to go through change management. And we have to do the training, and we have to generate the additional data, and we have to follow the same procedure, and we have to not introduce bias in the way we multiply that single element into many things.
Yeah.
So trust by the users, humbling, setting the right expectations, and making the system to be sustainable so it's not driven by exceptions. These are the main hurdles in any automation project, whatever technology you use.
Yeah. So thank you. The good thing that I hear that we still need users. I think that
Oh
this
yeah.
question can come up come up often, and I guess that just we will have such a question, and I already I think you as well, you had this question: will automation replace human and users and PV specialists? But let's jump to the third question, my last question before going to the questions from the audience. What could be looked at as a feasible alternative of balancing automation and user-centric tasks?
Yes. So that's a very good point. In PV, we receive a lot of information through some kind of forms. So things that are organized, either because you have a patient support program, you are funding the treatment of certain patients, whether because you have a post-approval safety study, so you need to poll your patient through their HCPs for what they are experiencing with the drug. It can be done digitally. You roll out applications where they fill in, you put that on your website. There is a page where they can report an AE, et cetera, et cetera. So one thing that you can already think of is avoiding users to type in, avoiding call centers to type in the information, reading the form, typing it into the system. You can make programs that are pretty efficient at extracting the information. You have two things that are challenging and difficult to achieve. The first one is a lot of time you have a core set of forms that are going to represent 80% of your activity. And then you have lots of forms covering the 20 rest of the ICSR reports you are getting. And you need to make a call very quickly on which ones you are going to handle by the system, by the automation, and which ones you are still going to do manually. Yeah. If you try to hit those 20%, you're going to spend a lot of money and you won't have a lot of return. Again, because you need many, many, many samples. And if you receive a form once every 2 weeks, then that means you're going to have 24 forms in a year, right?
Yeah.
And 24 is not enough for a computer, again, depending on the variations compared to the other forms, but it's not enough for a computer to be really successful, to be at this 100% you are shooting for. So the first limit is the form. And the second limit is the users. I mean, if they fill in using a system, that's okay. But if they fill in on a Word, like, on a Acrobat, on a PDF, an Acrobat, and it does not have any control of what information you put in, then people are going to write age in the date of birth. They are going to write a long sentence where you are expecting only a few words. They are going to start writing inside the box and then going over. They are going to put something in the margins, right? And so, first of all, OCR and writing, it's not accurate enough. you will be far from those 100%. So you will have a lot of things that will be sent to users, and you will spend money to do that.
to do
But
that.
beyond handwriting, if you don't have controls on the way the forms are filled, if you don't have support to train the users, if you don't have that feedback loop that says, okay, I got the form that is incorrect, I took care of the system and the automation, I need to take care of the user that fill in the form to remind them, this is the way you should fill in, this is the information we are expecting, blah, blah, blah. And users are difficult to change. I mean, it's difficult to get people to adopt a new attitude. We just saw that when we were talking about the masks,
Yeah.
right? So the extract of structured information is something you can achieve. The second one is when you have lots of AE presented in a repeatable format. And again, being humble, you need to look at the
Course.
volume you're receiving and shooting for the big part of things you know are definitely repeatable. So if we take literature abstract as an example,
Yes.
there are things that you can automate, but you will still need users to be involved because there will be a lot of situations where you will not identify an AE despite the fact there is an AE. What we have found working on the subject and having a solution for that is sometimes the AE is in the legend of a table within the article. So it's
Yes.
not something that is explained in a sentence that any NLP engine can understand.
In a
It's
text. Yeah.
a document made of multiple things, some being images, some being legends, some being footnotes, some being index tables, and trying to understand how all this information relates to each other and where do you have that information sitting around. The other thing that you can address with automation in PV today uh, is coding. As we have seen, we have IME list in Medra and so on.
Pain
So
point. Yeah.
again, to some extent, if it's something that is coming back again and again, even though it could be expressed in a user way, I have pain in my leg. Well, okay, that's quite of obvious, right? NLP. But then I fall in the. I was feeling dizzy and I fall in the stair after taking the medicine. That's a little bit difficult to code. What
Yes.
exactly is happening? Is it imbalance? Is it so? As long as you have a way, a threshold of confidence that you can apply to say, here I can help you out. I can spend less time of the user by pre-processing the information and explaining what you did by pre-processing it, uh, you can definitely put in place automated tasks. But you have to be careful.
Yeah.
You need to present the information that you have received and the information that you have refined from that. And when required, you need to explain how you achieve that, how you move from this long sentence from the patient into those A's that you were presenting for the potential ICSR. Things like translation from
Yeah.
local language to English or vice versa
Vice versa.
still require user verifications
Yes.
because of the subtlety of the language and the lingo of PV. Um, it's very usual to see when dealing with NLP that you have multiple within the same language. You have multiple semantic fields or semantic domains that are very different. You have the patient. They talk about their situation in a non educated way, a non medically educated way, I will say.
Yes.
Right? You have the HCPs that could be talking like the patient because they want to faithfully report what the patient told them. And at the
Yes.
same time, could add when asked for follow ups or in the same report, their medically trained lingo. And then you have within the organization the local safety offices and the global safety offices. A local safety office in, let's say, in Brazil might use, let's say, something like, I don't know, GSU, Global Safety Unit, right?
Units. Yes.
And they, in Brazilian, in Portuguese Brazilian, they will write GSU. And it might mean something in Brazilian, right? I don't know Brazilian, so.
Yeah.
But this time, this is an acronym. And this applies to the same thing. They could call a product with an acronym. They could call a condition with an acronym. They
With an
could call
acronym.
lab data with an acronym. This acronym could be generic, but it could be like X-ray, but it could be also an acronym specific to the way they talk about X-ray in Brazil, right?
Yes.
So again, as the goal is to try to achieve has an accuracy as high as possible, with little intervention by the users, because more intervention you are, more cost you have, and more challenges to have a system that is not driven
Yeah,
by
definitely.
exception. You do have to be humble. You can try to simplify the translation. You can try to make sure the translation is better, but you need to take into account a lot of variables. For the forms and the extraction, same thing. For the coding, same thing. You
For the
need to
instructor,
understand
yeah.
where is your limit, where is the computer limit, where do you get into a territory where you're going to make more mistake than accurate result. And so that's why I'm talking about the journey. That's why I'm talking about the sustainability, because through a journey you can little by little increase that threshold. Little by little you can make progress on providing more accurate results, more precision. An automation project is not a short-term project. It's a different way to do the business every day.
Yeah.
And it's going to be the new way to do business for a long time until we can say, okay, users, nice to have, computers can go to jail, everything is done by computers.
Yeah, what I understand is that the journey is still long
Yes.
to improve this automation, to apply this automation, and yeah, with different activities in PV, like you mentioned, the unstructured source documents for extracting, and the pain point with the literature screening. Yeah, so there's many activities, and we are living nowadays those challenges. And thank you for your inputs, Francois. Let's jump to the audience comments and some questions. So, Harshawi, say hi, Omar. Hi. Hi, Amina. Yeah, so fantastic background, Francois.
Good. Thank you.
This is the first question. Could we, from Harshawi, could we switch the reactive approach to proactive or predictive approach?
So yeah, companies are not waiting, right, on the technology to be ready. They are starting to organize, and it's a extension of what R&D is doing. So typically R&D is creating multi-skills teams around the compound, or most likely a set of compounds using similar technology for targeting the same type of condition or diseases. And safety has to be part of that game, right? Usually safety is thought by a lot of R&D people as regulated, and you do only what the regulatories are giving you, and it's after the fact. So you first start to make sure that your management, your PV management, has made the explanations, has sell the idea that PV within those multi-skilled team is going to save ultimately money. We can do some work to a certain level on the prediction for things like labeling. I was talking to someone that has been working a lot into that field of predictive safety. We have a limit for every omnics we can think of, that no matter what we see in the lab, we could still have some surprising side effects when giving the drug. But at the same time, if you take into account the primary target, the secondary target, and the pathways, most likely very early in the process, you can get 75% of your labeling. You still need to strategically find out the 25% missing. And so the goal of safety has been, as part of the R&D, is not simply to ensure that we are following the rules to the books for the regulators. It's also to try to influence the protocol design, the patient selection, the study of the condition, even the communication you are going to give to the investigators or the patient, in a way that will be more efficient to find out those 25%. So that will be the first step, is an organizational decision. It's working with other people and telling them what is the value you are making. And the value is, we don't invest in a compound that is going to fail. It's very difficult as a message because a lot of R&D people wants the compound to succeed, and we want the compound to succeed. But we have to find ways to say, we safety can help you figuring out the best way within your protocol, in addition to the efficacy, to find out very early on the safety of what we are working on.
Yeah, thank you. The other question. I think it's yeah. Thank you, Dr. Omar. Thank you also Francois for let us being part of this valuable event. You're welcome. Greeting to Dr. Francois. My cue is creating a next-gen PV system for improved patient safety by using IT. What is the desired benefit in terms of cost and speed of response to patient and product safety requirements?
So this is a very large question. I will try to be concise here. First of all, all life science organizations, especially all pharmacovigilance organizations, are saying, oh, we care about the patient safety. But in fact, we cannot achieve it. We have to be realistic. We can only set the product safety.
Yes.
Why I'm saying that? Because the product is what we put in the box that eventually gets to the table of the patient. After that, we don't know. We don't know if it's taken regularly. We don't know the condition of the patient, where they live, what kind of other stress, chemical agents, whatever they have in the air or pollution they are facing that could interrupt their therapy, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to product safety and in terms of next-gen PV system, where we have to try to find the right balance is, first of all, to address what people spend a lot of time on. And if you look at how a PV department works, they spend a lot of time in meetings.
Oh, yes.
Well, you have to have meetings. You have to have communication. You have to be aware of what is going on. So you will not be saving a lot of that, not by an IT system, or by using things that make collaboration and communication better, but they are not part of your PV system. They are outside of that. The second thing they spend a lot of time on is emails. So you have to find a way to understand which part of the emails can be as part of your transactional system, as part of the information they see on the screen, that they can get it right away. They don't need to send it by an email with an attachment. They don't need to download the attachment, open the attachment, make a modification here, then create an email, then drag the attachment, then send the email, and the Excel files that go with that. A lot of time I'll spend on Excel files. This time, this person did that, and then the Excel file is being stored in the network, and then regularly people are going to connect and say, what's the last time I update this information? What's the more accurate information I can find? I have 2 Excel files with the same name. Which one is the good one? I have one that is more recent than the other one, but it doesn't have the same number of entries that I was expecting. And the other one has the right level of entries, but it's, So you really have to first try to set, if you are talking about the next gen, something that is going to help people in their day-to-day desk activity, duties activities, and emails, reconciliation, Excel files. This is really key. Make sure you have that. Then yes, potentially in terms of cost, that will be a win-win. You will have people that will work more of their time on the product safety, less on office-related activities.
Yeah.
And then you will have also potentially a capability to demonstrate that because you are generating less Excel files, because you are storing less data on those very high-level storage system, since those files have to be accessed and opened from everywhere and at any time, then you could very well have an IT system in terms of storage cost and computer cost that will be almost identical of what they were doing before, simply by addressing the Excel file.
Yeah,
I don't
thank
know
you.
if I answered
Yeah.
the question.
Yeah, thanks. Definitely. Other question. Hello, Francois. Hello, Dr. Omar. Thank you for sharing your insights. Welcome. What change or adaptation in current PV business processes is required to help AI, artificial intelligence, to be more proactive and predictive in future as possibility?
Three things:
Yeah.
data, data, data. So the problem we have in data science is we have data, but we lack the context. So let me give an example. You have a process that you always have in PV systems called quality control, quality check, QC, right? And users are modifying the data. When they do the modification, they are in fact not telling you why they are doing the modification. You can have an audit trail. You can know that this was the value and that was the value and this is the user. But why did they change the value they receive? Is it because it's needed for their business process? They realized that this was an A with a product complaint. Product complaint information was missing, so they decided to add it. That could be something you could find out by looking at the data over time, but you might not know what they use to ascertain that this was a product complaint. Yes, we have techniques in terms of data science where we could infer to some level of confidence how this became a product complaint. So when you have a QC steps, finding a way in the system to capture the intent of the user and why the data was changed is going to be critical, to do it in a way that doesn't require more work to be done. You want the QC to be done as quickly as possible. So you can find ways to do that. We are using a certain approach to do this, to make a distinction between the updates that are not done because the computer was wrong when extracting the data from the form, when translating, when understanding the email, and then another form of correction when the data is being corrected because of data alignment to the business process and the need for business process. It won't make the AI more proactive, but it will help increasing the capability of the data science or the computer to understand how the data came to be. The second thing is, in a lot of systems out there today, you have an understanding of the changes at the database level. So a lot of systems are going to consider a change in the data did not happen until the data is written into the database. But that's not true. There are a lot of changes to the data that are done within a screen. And they are not saved right away. And so you have situations where a first set of data is being put on the screen and people move and go that place and they look at the data in that place and they realize they should go back in this place and have the data here, and then they should. Typically, systems out there do not capture all that minutia of how the data came to be. Because again, we need to understand what we have after the fact so that the computer can make classification or qualifications of what the data mean in a more faster and with more precision than what you could do without that additional layer of information. So that is something that could potentially make it more predictive by looking at how you can justify. If the system doesn't do it, then you have to make sure the report, the CAPA, the safety team meetings are capturing the reason of a change and explaining or finding ways to map the decisions made by those out of those meetings and the data that were happening at that time. You want to keep track of what influenced the change in your data. And sometimes the decisions come from those kappa
Yes.
and those changes in
Corrective
procedure.
and yeah, corrective
So I think,
actions, preventive
yeah.
actions.
So having a good trace of that, even if in the data and in the system you don't have all the traceability I was talking about, could help your data scientists, not the computer, but the
Yeah.
people organizing the data, preparing the data for the processing, to introduce the additional dimension, a different type of classification or categorization to capture this information.
Yeah. Thank you, Francois. We have 10 minutes left,
Oh,
and we
wow.
will try to answer briefly, as we have some of our students asking valuable question, like Raj. Thank you so much for your elegant discussion on artificial intelligence. How could AI be updated for global signal detection?
So you have three elements here: global, signal, and detection, right? The AI can be used in those three things, but there are different types of methods that have to be used. So for the detection, it's all about threshold. It's all about, can I see a comparison between something I was expecting and something that I finding out, or something that was happening up to that date and something that has happened after that date. What was going on, right? So AI is capable of doing that by having access to a large corpus of data for a long period of time, as long as we can refine that data to really focus the search on the elements that we want to look after. And as I said, one of the challenge we have is that in the PV database, in the public databases, we have a lot of data that are missing or that have gone through different standards of data organizations,
Yeah.
entries, classifications, that are going to throw wrenches into the computer processing. So detection means thresholds, identification of thresholds can use AI, but you have to understand the data. Signal means something is happening and it's definitely connected to something I'm doing
Yes.
as a company, right?
Yes.
Um, Potentially, you have signals that are related to abuse or overprescription or misuse of a drug.
Yeah.
And yes, you can find that, but it's all about analyzing what you have found through the detection. So when you analyze numbers, because the detection is going to give you an idea of a number, you need to connect those numbers to the context. So you need to find out, yeah, I have a product and an event. I see that they are occurring more than what I was expecting. What is the typical ICSR that I have behind? And again, as I said, because AI is based on statistical method, data science is very good at giving you a pattern. Oh, it looks like this is mostly for patient a certain age or in a certain location or through this type of HCP, which is something we might not have in the safety database. We might have the HCP reference, but we might not have things like a really occupation or specialty or proper identification of the HCP. It is in certain countries, it's not in all countries, and that's where we get to the global piece. You will never really achieve global because we are dealing again in PV with very different regulations and very different tracking. What you can do in UK because they have NHS or in Canada, you
Yes.
cannot do it in US. You have to rely on partnership with companies to try to identify that drug distribution network, who prescribed the drug, under which condition, did the patient adhere to the therapy. So you have to work beyond the PV team of signal detection. You have
Yes.
first to work within the company with other departments. You have to work with people that are working for patient engagement. And again, if you are going to bother them, you need to show how you are going to help them. And again, here, signal detection, especially identifying the patterns that make this product even combination appearing when it is related to behaviors of HCPs or patients. The goal is making your patients happy. And so you will go through the patient engagement team and say, I can help you make your patients happy to adhere more to the therapy if you help me to understand how they get the drug and how it is prescribed. So is AI really capable of doing that? I don't think so. But you could still work on the signal and the detection piece you have put in place first to try to show the patient engagement team what you can give them.
Perfect. A lot of interesting question. I'm really sorry for the audience. We cannot answer all of them, but there's a valuable questions like, hi Vivan from California. This will be very far down the line, but do you see AI in PV reducing the need for PV outsourcing? In 1 minute.
Yes, definitely. Because what we want to achieve with data science is to get away from the clerical task and really invest into the high value added task. And when you work for a company with a limited portfolio, it's better to invest in the same users to develop that knowledge. I was talking about the fact that the value from users comes from medical education and medical training. And so if you have the PV training that complement that, then the users are going to be able to produce something that the computers are not going to be able to produce. If you have taken care of the cost of entering the data and dealing with the data, then it makes a lot of sense. So yes, the effect of data science could potentially reduce outsourcing by putting more emphasis on the added value task due to PV training, medical understanding, and medical education. Yeah.
Perfect. Another question. Thank you very much for this interesting conversation. Are companies also integrate data generated by patient in social media? In 1 minute.
Again, as I said, it's if you can understand the lingo the patients are talking. So if you start with a well-known product for a well-known disease inside your company where you have a connection with patient groups that can help you understand how the patient typically talk about their conditions and the efficacy or the safety of the treatment, then you can start, setting training an NLP engine to really make up this element. We have sentiment analysis that is a well-known technique in NLP, but here what we are trying to achieve is should we, the goal is what do we do next? Right? If the patient is telling you something, you need to have an action plan in place to reach out to the patient. Yes. Are you authorized to do that? Do you have the consent to do that? What type of information you are giving? What type of information you can give to them beyond the simple reading of the package insert? How you are going to formulate the medical safety information to someone that doesn't understand medical science at all? So before you can use social media from the patient, you need to make sure you have a plan. If you were getting information, what you're going to do with it. Yes. And that's difficult. That's the difficult part, in fact. Analyzing the information from the patient, it's not the most difficult one.
Definitely. Thank you, Francois. From Arcelia, one of our students from Mexico. Hi, why do companies do not succeed when implementing AI for PV processes? What is likely to be the main obstacle?
So it's not having the right expectations. Management want to see AI reducing costs right away. They want things for yesterday. And the teams are concerned, the frontline people are concerned they're going to lose their job if they put in place AI. And this conundrum of expectations here and fear over there is what impacts most the project. So it makes the project more complicated, it makes more time. So you need education. You need to educate management of what is a reasonable expectation, what you can really do, be very honest about what data science can achieve. And then, as I said, you have to make sure the users understand we want to get away with the things that do not have any value to your job or to the company and invest into the things you do that do add value and are good for the company.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. We have a lot of thank you notes from the audience. Thank you, Francois, thanks for this informative webinar. Thanks for this. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. A lot of thank you. Thank you. Hi, Katayun, one of our followers, our students, Katayun from Toronto. We have a question, dear doctors. I need to know what to do to get the first role in that field. So I guess that it's a question from me. Yeah,
Yes.
and it makes a transition for my last slides. Which say that Innovigilance is providing drug safety and pharmacovigilance certificate, an online course tailored for fresh graduates, for professionals, healthcare professionals, to get in the front door, to get a step in drug safety and pharmacovigilance. We already have students from over the world. We have also successful graduates that joined pharmaceutical companies in the US and in Canada and other region. So yeah, the other thing also, and to wrap up with with the webinar, so just that the course is developed with an amazing team, RX course with Dr. Shams. She's also leading this webinar, technical things with this webinar. We provide the QPDS, qualified professional in pharmacovigilance and drug safety certification recognized by the American Society of Pharmacovigilance, and provide you 1 year for free membership with the American Society of Pharmacovigilance. All that you need to do is to visit our website, www.innovigilance.com, to send us, to follow us on LinkedIn, my LinkedIn profile. You can send me invitation and follow our posts. Also, Innovigilance International Academy LinkedIn page, Facebook, and also we are present in Clubhouse, the brand new social media, and we are conducting also a weekly room every Wednesday at noon Eastern time in the US and Canada, and we are discussing valuable topics in drug safety and pharmacovigilance. You can also follow Francois and send Francois invitations from Francois on LinkedIn, Francois Audibert. Yeah, so we're done. Thank you, Francois, for this valuable insights. As always, I learned a lot from you. I'm really happy and feeling lucky to know you, to have you as a guest, and share your knowledge and your broad experience with our audience, with our followers, with our students.
Thank you for having me. The pleasure was mine.
Thank you, Francois, and thanks for all our students, our followers, for attending this webinar. The next one will be also a very interesting one with a quality, PV quality. With we will talk with Kishan from Chicago about his experience in PV audits and PV inspections and quality CAPA system and all the PV quality, which is very, very interesting. So just follow us and stay tuned. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Bye.